broader macroeconomic environment that we're in. And of course, the focus right now, and I'm sure this is the case for pretty much all finance leaders out there today, even ones that are in companies that are growing nicely, profitably, sustainably. The focus now is and probably will remain on maintaining that sustainable, profitable growth. And I think where AI plays into that is how do you think about achieving increasing efficiency, especially as you continue to grow, especially as you continue to support increasingly complex permutations of your business. These are things that I think we should all be focused on, especially in such a challenging market, which is much more demanding and much less forgiving.
Hi, it's Jack from CFO Thought Leader, bringing you a special troubleshooter episode where we speak to different industry experts and members of the C-suite about top-of-mind subjects in finance. This episode, we're pleased to have caught up with Tal Kirschenbaum, CEO and founder of Ledge, a software company based in Israel that is dedicated to helping finance leaders scale their operations through centralized data and automated cash flow management. And in fact, Ledge is a sponsor partner of CFO Thought Leader, full disclosure. But at the same time, I want you to know, given the opportunity to speak to Tal Kirschenbaum, an entrepreneur who began building this company only a few years back, I thought a finance audience would find his story compelling because of what he's up to and how much thought he has behind the concept of the Ledge offering. And so we were pleased when he accepted our invitation to participate in a troubleshooter episode. And so with that, permit me to introduce you to Tal Kirschenbaum. I enjoyed our talk. I think you'll find it interesting. Hello, we're speaking with Tal Kirschenbaum, CEO and founder of Ledge. Tal, welcome.
Thank you, Jack. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to have you with us. So if you wouldn't mind, we always like to begin by asking our guests to look back for us. And we're wondering, what was that career path that led you to establish Ledge? I mean, where did you begin? Take us back.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm by education, I'm a finance person, studied accounting and economics for undergrad. And then, at business school, University of Chicago, also specialized in finance and had the privilege of being able to learn from pretty notable professors. And that was a fantastic experience. And then had the opportunity to participate in a bunch of different things across different aspects of finance. So I actually started my professional career as an associate at a venture capital fund with Intel Capital, which is Intel's in-house venture capital arm, its corporate venture capital arm, which was really a phenomenal experience each time to analyze a business from different sectors, different industries, to try to learn about that specific domain and evaluate a business's opportunity to succeed, to grow. And later on, joined the Boston Consulting Group, BCG, where I had the opportunity to advise both on strategy as well as on corporate development matters. So helping large corporates think about expansion, some M&A activity. Later on, joined Facebook's corporate development team and led some M&A activity for Facebook, so helping acquiring companies into Facebook as well as some of Facebook's other properties such as Instagram, Messenger, WhatsApp, and so on. Then I joined a payments company which does accounts payable and accounts receivable automation called Melio. And it's actually through Melio that a lot of the ledge story started coming about.
Was it in the back of your head that you were going to become an entrepreneur at some point in your career? I mean, back at Intel Capital or even BCG, was that seed already taking root?
For me, it was always there. I come from a pretty entrepreneurial environment, and I think I had the privilege of being able to navigate my way along a few different steps, such as getting a perspective of an investor, getting a perspective of an acquirer at a large corporate, and then actually being an operator as well, where I got to see, especially a young business's entire journey, really, throughout a few different lenses and filters.
So we get the sense that you're looking for an opportunity as you build your career, as you went to
Mm-hmm.
business school, go on, build your careers, you're in corporate development, you're looking at different opportunities. What is it that you begin to see? What is it that you begin to recognize as a business opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in different throughout different experiences, it's been different things. As an example, with Melio, it was the combination of a very large market, which is B2B commerce, which has something about it that doesn't make sense when you stop and take a critical look at it. And with B2B commerce, it really has to do with how businesses simply choose to transact with one another. And the specific problem that Melio tackled, or still tackles it rather today, is the use of paper checks and how both parties of a transaction actually have to share the same payment method. And if you stop and think about it critically, it really doesn't make a lot of sense, right? In the age of digital payments, that more than 50% of B2B commerce is actually still being conducted with the use of paper checks. So that was kind of the case with Melio. And with Fledge, what we really do is we help finance teams automate a lot of their day-to-day tasks, which tend to be quite repetitive, sometimes involving even manual data entry and so on. And again, when you take a look at that and you think about, well, that's actually something that quite a few different companies share. And obviously, I think we've all gone through this, and I'm sure many of your listeners and viewers have as well. It's a type of an experience which really shouldn't be the one that we optimize for and wish for. Anyone who's now joining finance as a profession, having to sift through transactions and look through bank statements and trying to develop an understanding of what really happened with your transactions in the narrow sense, but really finances in the broadest possible sense. And then, of course, making sure that your general ledger is aligned with all of that. So it was a process of taking a critical look at some of these very natural business processes that we all live and work through that kind of led me to the specific first problem set and later on solution that we're focused on.
So, for many of us, the payment technology space is rather noisy. And you said that specific problem set. I like that because I think you were zeroing in on something. Can you get a little more specific with us?
Absolutely. So I think it's a combination of a few things. I think that many companies share the same kind of backdrop, the same overarching set of circumstances where they deal with a significant volume of transactions and payments, and they experience some pain that's associated with it. Often, that pain is actually associated with the need to align this really high volume of data, really, because that's what it is, which is actually spread across a set of siloed systems, which could be your bank, could be payments processors, maybe such as Stripe and PayPal that you may use. It could be a billing solution. And of course, making sure that it all aligns eventually into your ERP, to your general ledger. This set of circumstances is one that's actually quite common. And the way that many people will choose to tackle that is simply by using kind of brute force and leveraging people, finance operators, as the human glue that connects the dots across that very fragmented, disparate set of data sources. With with that set of circumstances, you need some sort of a sophisticated solution that's going to be able to help you grow, and that's going to help you with scaling your capabilities as your business scales as well, without necessarily scaling the size of the team. And so when you think about that from the broader perspective and think about how that then fits in with the broader story that we're seeing in fintech in general, and you talked about some of the noise that exists in this space, I think there's been amazing innovation in fintech and in payments as well. There are new ways to both pay and get paid. Real-time payments, RTP, is a new sort of a payments network that's now going live with more and more banks and financial institutions, and that's really fantastic. But the story that's not being told really has to do with what I mentioned before, which is the burden of growth that the finance team has to deal with. And while those tools and capabilities are really amazing in what they enable, they still are very much siloed. They operate within their own set of ecosystems. And as the finance team has to handle more and more data that has to do with revenue, with entities, as they have to deal with more and more currencies, more payment methods, they essentially end up getting pulled into a vortex of manual and low value tasks. And what ends up happening is that finance teams are kind of bloated with just having to keep up with this very manual, repetitive, reporting related type of tasks that has to do with audit preparation that always ends up getting longer. It's taking longer and longer to close the books, to deal with SOX compliance. It's getting harder to prevent losses, to prevent reporting errors. Even just getting an up-to-date picture of a company's current cash position can now take multiple logins, multiple cells that you have to build within Excel, by which time usually that data is already actually outdated. And so what ends up happening is really the company's growth then becomes a double-edged sword for finance teams.
And I'm getting a sense of, I'm trying to think of like a finance leader who has to make one of these difficult decisions in terms of, all right, going forward, we're enjoying some good growth. The revenue is coming. I can increase the team, or I can start making some technology investments here that I will have to educate everybody and train my team on. But wait, maybe I just make a few hires and I can put a Band-Aid on this and not worry about any concerns from my fellow management team members.
I think you're absolutely right, and you hit the nail right on its head there. With, I think, up until this point, that really was the question or the trade-off that was being made by finance leaders. Do I bring in more people or do I use technology? But to use technology often means that, as you said, there's a long implementation and onboarding cycle. You need to train your team on how to use new tools and technologies. And so, I think for us at Ledge, and for actually quite a few other companies in this broader space of the CFO tech stack, one of the biggest first challenges, but then unlocks that we've seen is in the focus on a product which is specifically tailored for finance teams, in the sense that finance operators and leaders have to be viewed not just as the ultimate beneficiaries of the product, of the technology, but rather as the primary and very often sole stakeholder for which you're building. That means that the product needs to be one that can be not just used by finance operators and leaders day to day, but also even implemented and configured by them, and in no time. Because I think today with this proliferation of solutions, with this proliferation of tasks, especially manual ones, there's very little tolerance to extended implementation, onboarding, education cycles. And I can give you an example that we at Ledge actually pride ourselves on being able to come in and be able to help a finance team not get up and running, but start solving their specific problems in as little as a few days. And that's not, something I think that makes us unbelievably unique or special, but rather this is what the market now demands. And we're seeing many, many more solutions geared specifically for finance teams that apply that same mindset, that same approach.
When you say geared specifically for finance teams, you set out to create a piece of software that would be sensitive to and understand what the priorities are ordinarily within a optimized finance function. What these people think about is important. This software has to be responsive to something like that, or
It's 100% that. I myself am a finance operator by education, by training. Other folks on the team are as well. The solution that we have is one that views the finance person in the center and actually thinks about the different types of jobs to be done or tasks that finance team struggle with on a daily, weekly basis. Things such as cash application, reconciliation, cash flow reporting, cash flow forecasting, reporting on current cash positions, um, ledgering. All these tasks are part of the bread and butter, right? These are all part of the very basic tasks that a finance operator has to do, not to excel in anything, but rather just to meet the very basic fundamental requirements of their jobs. And unfortunately, those tasks are becoming increasingly more difficult and challenging. And that is because volumes are growing. That's because complexity is increasing. We're seeing companies operate in a much more international fashion, in more currencies, with more entities, using an increasingly higher, larger number of banks, bank accounts, processors, data sources that they have to deal with. That makes the finance team's job that much more challenging. And we focus on those specific challenges and we help solve them by automating a lot of that work to essentially help transition the finance person from one that just has to tick the very basic boxes into one who can actually add much more strategic value, which is why we all joined the profession, really.
I want to just touch on AI with you. And I'm wondering, from your viewpoint, how you believe it'll impact the role of finance leaders. What's going to happen here? What's happening now, maybe?
So obviously, there's a lot of hype and attention and focus being given to AI. I think rightfully so. And there's a few different opportunities. I think there's a lot of opportunity for AI to bring value to finance teams who are drowning in this tsunami of financial data and then need to make sense of it all. And again, freeing them from the manual data work and enabling a much more strategic oversight capability. And there are two main use cases that I think will surface as ones that are much more viable and feasible in the immediate future, at least, and that will help transform finance teams. I think the first one has to do with operating with a very high volume of unstructured data. I'll give you an example. That's something that we use AI for. If there's a broken string in a bank statement or a company that has changed its name, AI can then be used to solve this gap by being able to connect the dots and fill in the blanks. And at Ledge, we use AI for smart matching for those exact instances. Name mismatches between a bank transfer and invoices, which are unbelievably common, but quite brutal when you operate at a massive scale. And the second, use case that I think is quite relevant in the immediate future has to do with AI being, I think, quite well suited for forecasting. and using things like linear regression together with user inputs to actually help predict various types of outcomes. Now, this again is another one of those tasks that can quite easily help free up the finance team's time from the manual side of data entry, data manipulation, and enable them to really think about the so what. What do we now do with these insights that we have? The other thing I'll quickly mention on AI is that we need AI and robust technology to help uh, compensate, I think, specifically for the shortage that we're seeing in finance in general, but I think even more specifically within the accounting space. Obviously, accountants are quite often the backbone of a finance team and as a byproduct of many businesses. And there's been this acute shortage of them in the market. And so there's this desperate need for technology to step in and help fill that gap, really. And it's not just about the labor gap, but it's actually also about being able to increase the retention of accountants, of finance operators, by again moving them away from the repetitive, tiresome, low value tasks and towards a much more interesting and strategic work that they could be doing.
Just curious how you might view how things are evolving. I mean, when you began Ledge only a few years ago, were the priorities any different for finance leaders? Were the top of mind items the same, or have things migrated rather quickly? What would you tell us?
So I think things have changed in a meaningful way over the few recent years. It's an incredibly tough market, of course, out there. Finance leaders, I think specifically, are looking at not just how to grow, which was, I think, obviously the focus in the past 15, 20 years, but now looking at how to grow sustainably and profitably. And for venture funded companies, it means looking at extending runway for as long as possible, because of course raising money has become increasingly more difficult. For public companies, it means focusing on their margins. And I think finance leaders are also more focused these days on actually wanting control in a much greater sense over their balance sheets, over their books, really in the broadest sense. And the level of tolerance for errors has actually gone down significantly, because those all represent pockets of value that you're just missing out on. And it's usually quick and easy wins that you can take care of.
It occurs to us that your background and your resume actually does resemble that of many finance leaders. And it would seem to me that the path to the CFO office is something you might have considered um, had you not been an entrepreneur. We wonder if the CFO office was ever on your radar, or was it just so clearly, no, I want to create something from the ground up, and it's not about an office or a title for me. It's just that I want to be a founder and grow a
I
company.
think for me, it was an option, one that I was actually quite interested in. I was always, and I think this is a sentiment that many of your listeners, viewers will share, obviously attracted to finance specifically, and of course, wanting to continue specializing in finance was always a consideration. Um, that is something I did look at. And for me, it ended up being a question of, is entrepreneurship the way in which I can help add more value versus perhaps pursuing the more traditional CFO path? Given the opportunity, the specific opportunities, and rather going back to our previous part of our conversation now, of our chat now, set of problems that I've identified in the market, it ended up being entrepreneurship for me.
You have M&A experience, and again that consulting experience. It's always interesting to me how the finance leaders who have consulting on their resume, particularly BCG, Bain, McKinsey, are perhaps some of the more dynamic or usually great storytellers too. Why is that? What is it about? And I know there's a big client side piece to it as well. You understand the client relationship.
I think a big part of consulting is in being able to take a vague, sometimes abstract problem, obviously analyze it and come up with a suggested solution. But that's often the more call it rigorous part of the process. That's more maybe challenging from an intellectual perspective. But then the other part of the challenge, which actually could often be more challenging and more difficult to overcome, has to do with how do you then generate buy-in into your suggested course of action. And that has a lot to do with storytelling. How do you then take this abstract problem, break it down into a set of questions or maybe bite-sized topics that could then be tackled one by one and that can help establish this sort of a storyline that helps build towards this suggested course of action. And I think that's a sort of a trait which is valuable, to be honest, in many different professions. I think it's valuable to finance leaders. It's valuable to entrepreneurs as well.
Tal, we know you got your MBA at the Booth School at the University of Chicago, but undergrad, you're at the University of Tel Aviv. You have something of an American accent, but and we've had quite a few Israeli finance leaders on the show along the way, but you don't sound like them.
Yeah, I am Israeli born and raised. I did spend some time growing up in the States as as a kid, ages 3 to 6, and then later on in my career, as you mentioned, I also went to business school in Chicago, and then stayed on with BCG and as part of their Chicago office. Joined Facebook in their Menlo Park headquarters as well, so had this additional stint in the U.S.
When you choose business schools, University of Chicago, Booth School, I know James O. McKinsey was a professor there, or graduated there way back when, so it has a long history of esteemed business insight. But how did you come about choosing that?
Chicago specifically is obviously the center of excellence specifically for economics and finance. One of my professors, to just add a bit of color around that, one of my professors during the time when I was in business school, Eugene Fama, he actually was recognized as chosen as one of the Nobel Economics Prize laureates during that time, and that's the type of access that I think you're able to get in such a school, and of course other top schools. So for me, it really was something that had to do with the strength of Chicago, specifically in finance and economics.
As we learned, your years in corporate development and your time really in M&A. Reflect a little bit for us on the current environment for M&A. What comes to mind?
So I think it differs between buyers and sellers. In some ways, this is now a buyer's market. And I think buyers should always think through what it is that they're really optimizing for when they're thinking about acquiring another company. And the key questions that they should be asking themselves, in my view, is, will you really be able to achieve acceleration, which is always the key word in M&A, through this acquisition? If so, how? How do you then look for the best and most suitable target to optimize specifically for that acceleration? How do you structure a deal to incentivize all parties towards that acceleration? Founders, other shareholders, continuing employees, discontinuing employees, it all should be baked in. How do you then think through the integration effort to best integrate the target company into your organization to achieve those goals? And this is all much more art than a science, really, especially on the integration side. And the thing about acquisitions, it is very rarely a magic bullet. They often take up much more managerial attention and resources, both, of course, economic, financial ones, but not just, to pursue, to complete, and then to successfully integrate into your business. And so, my advice to folks on the buyer side is to enter the process with your eyes as wide open as possible. And of course, experienced buyers uh, know this and often have the battle scars for it. And then for sellers, especially in this market, I think the broadest possible sense, and especially I think as we're thinking about finance leaders and how they perhaps can think about adding as much value as they can to the broader management and executive teams as they're thinking about going through a sale process. I think for finance leaders, of course, the ideal thing is to try to position yourself as a strategic advisor to the management team. Sale processes are unbelievably taxing from an attention, from even an emotional perspective. And anything the finance leader can do to help add structure and organize the thinking can add substantial value. So, what I would think through in that specific situation as a finance leader in a company that's now starting to think through or actually pursue a sale process is to think through how I can add value to the management team in this process. Is it by running the process? Is it by developing and maintaining relationships with potential buyers and other ecosystem players, maybe such as lawyers and investment bankers? Is it by being the holder of the truth, which of course the finance person should always be? Is it through helping with effective negotiations? And I think from a tactical perspective, which this gets to the point of the finance leader being the holder of the truth, they should always have their ducks in a row. Tolerance for errors, especially in this market, is slim. Acquirers are vigilant about checking the books and running pretty robust, rigorous diligence processes. And so, as much as the finance person can always achieve this always ready state of the business, the better off they'll be.
Wow, some great takeaways there for us. Thank you, Tal. We want to wrap up by asking you to provide us with some advice as far as how CFOs should prioritize over the next 12 months. What would you tell us?
Absolutely. And I think that really plays into just the broader macroeconomic environment that we're in. And of course, the focus right now, and I'm sure this is the case for pretty much all finance leaders out there today, even ones that are in companies that are growing nicely, profitably, sustainably. The focus now is and probably will remain on maintaining that sustainable, profitable growth. And I think where AI plays into that is how do you think about achieving increasing efficiency, especially as you continue to grow, especially as you continue to support increasingly complex permutations of your business. These are things that I think we should all be focused on, especially in such a challenging market, which is much more demanding and much less forgiving.
Tal Kirschenbaum, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you for having me, Jack.